Thank you very much indeed. Firstly, for the invitation to speak and join with you during today's discussion, and the opportunity perhaps to share a few of my thoughts. Not so controversial. We'll see. So I've been asked to look at the issue of leading the transition to a clean energy system. And I thought, given that we're at a kind of a structured conference, we should start by understanding where we are now. And this is just an indication of the fuels that we use in the energy system in Ireland today. And I've taken the liberty of extending it a little bit into 2030, but I've carefully avoided you putting any numbers on the axes so that Breen doesn't challenge me afterwards. But listening to this morning's discussion, particularly Edward, who was saying, it's very hard to motivate people to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What are they? They're invisible. You can't feel them. You can't touch them. It's not real. It's not really something that mobilizes people. So I had a look at the first slide here, and I just said to myself, okay, we have coal in our energy system, but we have committed to stopping that in 2025, so you see it disappearing there. We have natural gas, we have oil used for transport, and we have already had a session on that, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but oil used in heating as well, and then we have renewables. And when you look at that, the first question that I ask myself is, what is the Irish dependency on importing our energy? And we depend almost, it varies, Corrib at the moment is distorting the numbers, but in essence, we import nearly 90% of our energy. So we are fully import dependent for our energy. Just think, for whatever reason, if we didn't have it, what would we do? And let me just go through some of the subtleties there. You see the amount of gas that we use? We have no LNG terminal in Ireland. We get our gas through undersea pipes coming from Moffat in Scotland. And of course this won't happen, but imagine a really worst case scenario, Brexit, where Britain says, off you go, and they decide to turn off the tap at the other end. What are we going to do for gas? And that's not such an outrageous concept. It happened when Russia turned off the pipe, going into 45 million people in the east of Europe in 2009. So it's not such an off-the-wall idea that our gas supply would stop. Our oil, it's a global commodity. We have storage, that's okay. But we have absolutely no control of the price of oil. If the price goes up, we pay it. If the price goes down, we benefit. It's great. And that brings me to the second part of that picture. It costs us between 4 and 6 billion euros a year to import that energy. What if we spent that same money in Ireland on Irish energy to deliver the same benefit to ourselves and our economy? Wouldn't that be a much better balance of our security of supply, our competitiveness where we can control the prices more, and ultimately our sustainability and response to climate change? So for me, I'm not going to talk about a clean energy system. I'm going to talk about a vision for Ireland, an energy-independent Ireland. Can we achieve it by 2050? That, for me, is the nationalistic call. Yes, we can have an energy-independent Ireland by 2050. Let's get on with it, and let's achieve that. And the question is, of course, then, how are we going to do it? So the first part of that question is, what do we use energy for? Well, we only have 3 services coming out of energy. We have transport. We've already had a discussion on that. And we have power. We're going to discuss that in a little bit more detail. And we have heat. And, the issue that always surprises me in conversation about energy is that heat is the Cinderella of energy. Nobody ever remembers how much energy goes into heat. It's 37% here. I can tell you in Europe, it's closer to 50%. Ireland is distorted because we're a very disparate population and we use a lot more energy for transport than the average in Europe. But so you're looking at, more than a third, somewhere between a third and a half of our energy going into heat, and we don't do anything about it. As I say, it's the Cinderella of our energy system. So what do we use in terms of the fuels for heat? And I have very deliberately included here, obviously, we have oil, because we have more than 1 million houses in Ireland currently using oil to heat the house. We have gas. We still have coal and peat. We have a very small share of renewables. And I very deliberately showed you 5% of losses, because 5% of the energy we use for heating goes to the atmosphere. It just goes up in smoke, as they say. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how are we going to change that to the benefit of the population? Well, of course, the first step, and this is the mantra, as you can imagine, out of Brussels, the first step is energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is, use less energy for the same services that you want. And in Ireland, that's one of the things we need to do, is energy efficiency in our buildings. As they say, if you're in a hole, stop digging. So in Ireland, we're in a hole. So let's stop building. First issue is any new build has to be to the highest levels and should preferably be fossil-free. You build a new house in the Netherlands today, you cannot connect to the gas grid. From 2023, it'll be the same situation in the UK. We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing with our building regulations in order to stop digging the hole? The second thing is, when you replace sustainably. As we speak, the Department of Education is upgrading the heating systems of some of the schools in Ireland, not all of them, but some of them. And they're putting in new fossil fuel systems. In 2019, they're putting in new fossil fuel systems. I call on you as parents, maybe a few grandparents, say no, say stop. It's not acceptable, especially to do it to our kids. And of course, the third area that we're challenged with is the retrofit. And the retrofit in Ireland is a particularly big challenge because we have, an ageing housing stock, some of which are very leaky, and it's not cheap or easy to do a retrofit. But we have the tools, we have the techniques, we have the mechanisms to do it. And what we need to do is to get that together as a combined effort, and I hope Kieran Hayes, who's coming up in the next session, will give us some indication as to how that can happen, through our local authorities, our local structures, to help people to retrofit and achieve the benefits and the gains that you see there. Of course, we will still need heating. If we're going to use heating, at least make it sustainable, preferably renewable. This is just an illustration of the share of heating from renewable energy in Europe. You can see that in Sweden, it's about 61%. In Sweden, they use basically a lot of biomass, of course, because they have lots of forests, but they also use heat pumps, as indeed Finland and Latvia do. On average in Europe, you see where it is. And if you look to the very small one, second last from the end, that's Ireland. Yes, it's so small, I'm afraid you won't even be able to see it, but the slides will be available afterwards. So, we don't even use renewable heat. Our target for renewable heat is 12% by 2020, and we might get to 6 or 6.5%. And the frightening thing about this is the technology exists. The technology is there to do it in a different way. And we can use the technology in our houses, in our apartments, in our semi-detached entities. We can use heat pumps. And even though we haven't fully decarbonised our electricity, we are making very good progress in that direction, so at least the pathway is positive by using it. And, 12 million people can't be wrong in Europe. They've already installed the heat pumps, and they work effectively. But again, you have to look very carefully at this, and you have to look right down to the bottom to see that in Ireland last year, there were less than 5,000 heat pumps sold, as compared to some of the numbers you see in other member states. So the issue there is an awareness of what is possible, what can be done, and how we can achieve it. Just to continue a little bit on energy efficiency, because it really is such a key element to achieving this energy independent status or vision, or a clean energy system. Light bulbs. For how many light bulbs have you got at home? If you look at the chart there, you can see that in Ireland you will save about €11 a year when you change your light bulb to LED. Multiply that by the number of light bulbs you have at home, and what does it mean for you? I'm sorry, this is very small, but you will see it afterwards. If you run your fridge every year, how much does it cost? And there's a part here that you may have difficulty seeing. What this chart, I don't have a light to show you. Ireland comes fourth from the top, but what's very, very interesting there is the share of the cost that goes in taxes. In Ireland, our taxes for your refrigerator are 22%. It's actually one of the lowest in Europe. We have the lowest taxes on energy of almost any of the European countries, and yet we are fourth from the top in terms of the overall cost. So we have to really look at our energy and to see how well it can work. And clearly, it's important that both our lighting and our appliances are efficient so that we can achieve that. But let's move specifically to the issue of electricity. What are the fuels that we're using for electricity in Ireland today and potentially up to 2030? We're using coal, but we've said that we're going to get out of coal by 2025-ish. We don't really use very much oil. We're using gas, more and more, and we have renewables. And of course, we have the lost energy that goes into the atmosphere by heating it. One of the things there is that when you look at the overall chart from 1990 up to 2020, 2030, as a guesstimate, and I don't say it's a definitive, it's almost a fourfold increase in demand. It's very interesting that Ireland is in a totally different position to the rest of Europe. Across Europe, from now to 2030, the studies that we did in the Commission estimated that the demand level would grow for electricity by 8%, mainly because some member states had so much excess supply, others didn't have enough. But if you had the interconnectors that would connect them together, the electrons would flow, and overall, the volume increase would be 8%. We're looking at least maybe a doubling going forward to 2030. Of course, it's true to say that data centres in Ireland is a big factor in that. And in that context, I think the department might be interested in looking at what the Danish authorities are doing for data centres, where they're now requiring data centres to generate and supply their own green energy through corporate PPAs. I think it's a great idea myself, to be done. But going forward to 2030, as you know, the call has been made that Ireland has to set itself the objective of certainly getting 32% renewable energy, supported by 70% renewable electricity. Is it achievable, you might ask, and I'm sure Aoife will ask. Yes, it is. Good news. Look at the technology costs of the production methods of renewable energy. They're falling through the floor. They'll be giving them away shortly. It's really, really impressive how the technology costs have fallen. And the thing to remember about this is that the fuel for these technologies is free. It's our wind. It's our sun. I should say light, because it's not sun. It's our light. So it's for free. So the more the technology cost comes down, the more the prices will come down, and the more achievable it is. Of course, it leads to things like bigger and bigger wind turbines. And if you look at the trajectory there, over the next number of years, the size of the wind turbine is going to go up and up and up and up because it becomes more efficient. It's an important issue. It's an important part of the change in the generation of power in our energy system. This is a graph that I've just taken from the International Energy Agency, and they're looking at how the power system is being changed by both wind and solar. And it's interesting, Denmark is at the top, and they have Ireland at the second. Internationally, there's great belief in Ireland and in our capacity to make this change. I think it's probably a stronger belief outside of Ireland than it is inside of Ireland. But I want to point out one very important element about this graph. In the Irish bar, there is no orange. There is no yellow. There is no solar. We have no solar energy in Ireland. For the technology that is considered to be the cheapest technology globally, it does not exist in this country. We do not use solar energy in this country at all. And that'll be a point for discussion, no doubt, as we go forward and forward. But look at how important it is going forward. This is it's stylized, of course, because this is a picture of a week in Germany in 2030. And there's a couple of things I'd like just to look at that. Firstly, you can see it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No, it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. No, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the two in the middle are the Saturday and Sunday. And then it continues the week. So the first thing you see is the difference in energy demand between the week and the weekend. The second is the shape of the curve. You see how high the peak is and how low the trough is. And you see the yellow there, that's solar. So we have a couple of very interesting things happening in the energy system going forward and in the power system going forward. And these are the issues that we need to react to in order to be able to achieve a clean energy system. The first issue is that peak, we have got to shave the peak. We have got to flatten that curve as close as we can to a straight line. We can do it in lots of different ways. You can do it, for example, through, firstly, distributed generation, where some of that demand is actually generated on-site and never goes through the grid system. You can do it through storage, which will also help. Obviously, energy efficiency just lowers the whole graph, and demand response is a key issue at the element there. So there are tools and techniques that are in existence that are currently being used that allow us to flatten that curve. Because if we keep the peak in the curve, we have to roll out all of the infrastructure for peak plus 25%. And I don't have to tell you how many pylons that means going through the countryside and how people will react to that as a concept. So we have got to think about electricity in an entirely different way. It's not something that's always there. It's something that we should use judiciously and cleverly in our own interest, both to save us individually money and to make the system work. And we can only do that by benefiting from the new tools and technologies that are there. So one such area, distributed generation, this is an illustration, it's kind of gone all over the place, of people's involvement in the energy system. The top one, it's 100 homes in Grenoble who put solar panels on their roof and who collectively supply energy to the grid. Cumbria, that's local farmers setting up a wind farm in their vicinity. The house is Flanders. Flanders is the home of renewable energy cooperatives. More than 1/3 of roof space in Flanders is covered by PV panels. So much so that they now have their own electricity supply firm. In the farm, in Bavaria, every farm, barn is covered by PV. Today, Germany gets 7% of its electricity from PV panels, many of which are coming from those barns. At one point in time, 50% of the PV panels in Germany were owned by farmers. A huge opportunity we've never availed of. Look at the factory there. I can tell that's a Nike factory, because you can tell by the logo. EPA has done the same thing. They have managed to produce an on-roof electricity generation for their stores at 9 cents a kilowatt hour. 9 cents a kilowatt hour. The school is in Scotland. It generates power during the day for when the school is occupied. And when the school is not occupied, the energy is used in the community. Maybe it's a touristic area, or else it's sold into the grid. It should not be wasted. And I think this is one of my hobby horses, if you will know. I cannot believe in the year 2019, we do not allow people to sell solar energy into the grid in Ireland. Now, Marguerite said it was costing them money because they were buying it at more than they could buy anywhere. You don't have to give a tariff. You just simply say to people, you can sell it to the grid and you will get the wholesale price. It's not beyond the wit of man to give you the wholesale price. And if the wholesale price is zero, you'll get zero. That's fine. People will accept that. It's a perfectly normal thing to say. Sell it in at whatever the wholesale price is, and when the wholesale price goes up, you get lots of money, and when the wholesale price goes down, you won't get lots of money. There's nothing magical about it. And I'm afraid they're going to have to do it anyway, because the directive from Brussels has now been signed, and when it comes into force, they'll have to do it. But do it sooner rather than later, please. The second issue is smart meters. Oh, smart meters. Well, smarter meters, anyway. It's true that as we go forward, and the reality is we will probably electrify much more of our heating and probably our transport, not to mention our power systems. So we need to be clever as to how we use it. Now, none of us are going to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to turn on the washing machine. Sorry, I'm not into that game myself. But fortunately, we have things called computers. And we have things called smart meters, who can assess what is the price of energy coming through the system and say, oh, it's cheap now, I'm going to put on the washing machine. Or, oh, it's expensive now, I'm going to, shut off the freezer for 5 minutes without actually affecting the thing. So it's all feasible. It's all there. The technology exists. It's out there. What do you need? You need to allow it to happen. You need to allow people to use the technology that's there so that they can benefit for it. Not at the end of this year, or at the end of next year, or at the end of the year after that. You need to allow it now, today, so that people can become part of it and become involved in the system. A small illustration, this is in Finland. Smart meter, they use heat pumps, of course, so it's electric. Smart meter system allows them to turn the heating on at different times. It also allows them to turn their hot water heating on. It's mostly in the middle of the night. That has saved them 17%. Just that has saved them 17% on the cost of their energy bill. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do that? So there are, for me, 3 messages out of this. 1, we need a vision. And we need a vision that allows everybody to feel part of it. We need to outreach to everybody and let everybody become involved in the system. So we need to, we have to be absolutely clear. 1, yes, we need to make people aware, that's for sure. But secondly, we have to eliminate obstacles. We should never say, you can't do this. We should just remove the word cannot from our dictionary. Everything is possible. Even for ESB networks. I don't know if Marguerite is still here. It's all possible. And thirdly, we should reward people, not just in a financial sense, but in a recognition sense. Some of it might be financial, but just a recognition sense, which should make people aware of the fact that they are doing something good. They can say it to their kids, they can say it to their grandkids, they can say it to their neighbours. Yes, I'm doing something for climate change. The second issue is we need to be brave. And indeed, Tara used the word earlier on. We need to be brave. We must be ambitious. Let us not shy away from high levels of ambitions. We are blessed in this country. We have the highest level of wind, ourselves in Scotland, of anywhere else in Europe. We have the capacity for solar. We will, in due course, have marine energy coming on track. We have the natural resources to be energy independent. Let's go for it. Let's be brave and set about it. Please, let's stop talking about the cost. Of course it's going to cost money. I mean, if it wasn't going to cost money, we wouldn't be here, because if it was cheaper to do it, it would all happen spontaneously. Of course it's going to cost money. But the real question is, what would it cost us if we don't do it? What is the cost of non-action? Not what is the cost of action. So let's be brave about the money as well and say it costs us more if we don't do it than if we do it, so let's go forward. And the real message is the starting gun has been fired. Let's do it now, otherwise there will be no race for these kids to run in the future. Thank you very much indeed for your time.